My name is Alexey Gusev. I represent the Russian venture company, which is the biggest venture fund in Russia and the key organizer of the Ostrov event, of this educational program for universities. My guest today and our guest speaker today, one of our visionary speakers, is Joanna Bryson, professor of computer science in the University of Bata, the United Kingdom, and one of the world's leading experts in the sector of not only artificial intelligence, but the intersection of artificial intelligence and social sciences. So the questions about the societal impact and ethical impact of artificial intelligence will be in the focus of our interview today. So my first question to Joanna is about the mythology around artificial intelligence. So why do you think there are so many myths about artificial intelligence? Why there are so many concerns? And as far as I remember, during your workshop today, you asked some questions to the audience about their concerns about artificial intelligence. So why these concerns and these myths are so sustainable? What do you think about it?
Well, I mean, some of the concerns about artificial intelligence are true. There's definitely big changes in society. And I thought in the workshop today, there was really some very informed questions, including people who said they weren't worried or that they were worried about the programmers, not the machines, which is correct. I mean,
about people, right?
Yeah, about people. So yeah, artificial intelligence, the A stands for artifact. Having said that, I got into this area when I was working in artificial intelligence on robots, because people would just walking by, they would say, oh, it would be unethical to unplug your robot. And I'd be like, well, it's not plugged in. This robot didn't even work. So, and I was confused by that. And for a long time, I thought people didn't understand the ethics of AI because they didn't understand AI, because it was new and they didn't really understand it. But after about 20 years, now I think the problem is they don't understand ethics. So they're not sure about what it is about a human that is of value. And so they're afraid that as we build a machine that comes more like a human, it becomes more valuable. Or also, they project to it. They hear it's a human, but it doesn't have our problems. It's not going to die. It's going to know everything. And so they hope to be like that machine. So there's like a hope and fear that's really about the nature of humanity. It's not like that. Actually, biological life is one of the best ways to persist that we didn't invent it, obviously, that the planet has managed to invent. The machines only last, on average, about 5 years. Humans last about 90 years. So immortality is closer with children than with your computer. But on the other hand, some of the things that people think about that the machines are going to do are actually things that companies can do with machines. So in some ways, the fact we think of AI as being human has helped bring our attention to things we weren't paying attention to, like the complete change in what privacy is. You used to be able to have privacy by obscurity, and that's just gone. That's over, and that's the digital era. It's not just AI. But because people are worried about AI, they've started discussing privacy, for example.
So many of these myths, many of these concerns are not focused on artificial intelligence in its core, right? So they are more about fears of this margin between human and digital, right? So about this.
I see what you're saying.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I think that a lot of the myths are based on this misunderstanding of being more intelligent, meaning that you're also more human-like. So that's a misunderstanding. But on the other hand, as I said, some of the concerns are good concerns. So it's not whether or not you can trust your robot, it's whether or not you can trust the manufacturer of your robot to have cyber-secured the robot so that you're not updating everything you say in front of the robot to the cloud. The robot isn't going to turn on you in the night, but a hacker could turn on you.
Right.
So the cyber, some of the concerns are almost well placed. But it's important in order to address the concerns that we understand the different kinds of human agencies that are behind the AI, because those are the things we can fix and we should fix.
Okay. And I have a question that is very much connected to your previous point. And that is a question about how should we educate software developers, software engineers, not only companies as entities, but also how should we educate programmers who are responsible for coding AI solutions?
Right. So I think it is really, most people are starting to realize we need to change computer science education to include more ethics. I think some people want to put too much blame on the developers or on scientists. You know, scientists are discovering these things. Scientists should only discover good things. So it's important to understand the whole system, but let's focus on the developers, since you mentioned that. Actually, if you are a software developer, then probably, since it's the 21st century, you have some idea of what good practice looks like in terms of documenting your code, which includes using revision control. So being able to see when you changed the code, who changed it, why they changed it, and cyber securing the code and also the records. With artificial intelligence, we need to do the same with the data that we use if we use machine learning. I mean, no AI system just programs itself. That's a myth that's being propagated, unfortunately, by some very famous developers because they're trying to sell machine learning to you.
The confusion between machine learning and artificial intelligence, right?
And the idea that the system programs itself. Machine learning is not the system programming itself. It's programmers choosing one of many ways to do machine learning, and a whole lot about from data, what data you put into it. The programmer also chooses the parameters of the machine learning system. The programmer decides when is the system done. So the programmer, or some programmers, this is usually a company, so some programmers are in charge of deciding how to test the system. If the system continues to learn after it's running, then you also have to design systems that maintain, that keep running tests the whole period. So all of that is our development decisions. It's all programming. It's not the old kind of programming of every single line of what the robot does, but which you can still do. Some systems still are that way, but but all of those decisions are things that humans make and that humans are responsible for. And so the programmers need to learn how to document that, and they need to realize that, on the other hand, in a way that hasn't been happening before, at least in many sectors, the government will be coming and expecting to be able to see those records. And that isn't a threat. That's not a threat to IP. It's not a threat to being able to have business secrets. You know, medicine is very well regulated, and they have 10 times as much IP as software does. So we all need to be better trained in how to work with governments and regulatory bodies, and to help the governments design regulatory bodies that will help us. A lot of companies want to do the right thing, but are afraid that other companies are doing the wrong thing. So they're nervous about that. So we need to come together and make the system work for everyone, so everyone does the right thing with their data and their AI and their code. So I think like architecture, eventually probably software engineers will be licensed. They'll have to prove that they understand these things before they can be hired. But again, it isn't only the programmers. They work inside of a company, and we would expect that the government would regulate the companies, and then the companies would regulate the programmers.
I see. So if we sum up, one of the solutions is to add some sort of regulation to the curriculum of software engineers, of software developers, and that should be something very normal for software developers to understand the regulation of artificial intelligence and of all the related methods, right?
Of software in general, right? AI is not that not that special and different, especially from a development perspective.
Speaking about regulation, you are very much involved in the processes that are undergoing in such countries like the US and the UK. So what could you tell us about the agenda of United Kingdom, of United States, and maybe European Union, and maybe even China, regarding artificial intelligence? And my special question is if these governments incorporate in their agendas such issues as ethics, as societal impact of artificial intelligence.
Right, that's a big question. It's only the world.
Yeah.
But
you may focus on the countries that you prefer to speak about.
Well, yeah, so the funny thing is, many countries now at this point are coming up with ethical principles that they describe. And some people are getting very critical of that because there's too many ethical principles. And they wonder if the process...
It could be over-regulated, right?
Oh, well, that's a different question.
Not a fear.
No, so there's one question. You know, some people are worried about over-regulation. They're afraid that they'll be constrained and they won't be able to build the systems they want to build. The other side is the fear of ethics washing. So if people say that they're that they have these principles and everyone's agreed to these principles, but it has no impact. I would say I have been watching not so much America. America is a weird case.
Because it's so big, right?
No, not because it's so big, because it's so badly regulated.
Badly regulated?
Yeah, so there's a lot of the innovation comes there. Well, they say there's a lot of the innovation is being done by Europeans, but the massive amounts of money being made are being made in America and China. And so it seems like these are like two extremes. They're not only large markets, but they're also not being regulated in a way so that they're getting huge amounts of money and pulling talent that way. But a lot of innovation is happening in the EU, and you know, people say there isn't because there's not these giant companies. But I say, well, that means that we're doing a good job. You know, we don't want giant companies with more power than our governments. And the economy of the EU is great. You know, I don't know why people are so sure that the other two economies are that much larger. So if you look at the EU as a whole, then the economy is doing quite well. So,
but there are no technological monopolies like, for example, Google or Amazon or Facebook or Apple in the European Union.
Yeah, there's none that are grounded there that have been allowed to expand at that ridiculous rate. Yes, that's true. There are some other big tech companies like, I don't know, Booking.com, SAS.
Or SAP.
Yeah, SAP, yeah. There's various other companies, but they're more conventionally slotted into the regulatory landscape, which is because the EU is a well-regulated space. Well, anyway, let's go back to the original question. So I would say the UK actually looks a lot like the rest of the EU. Except it's a little bit ahead in terms of as far as I know, it's one of the leaders in hiring. So basically, the EU already said about 3 years ago that every member state should have these regulatory bodies, like I talked about. So there should be some kind of expertise to try not only to stop people from producing stuff, but that you can go to ask. If you think there's been an abuse, so you want to have expertise. So this is a responsive thing, sort of like environmental agencies. So you could be monitoring to see if you think it looks like there's a problem, but also if someone says, hey, I'm getting sick, you can call and ask, please come and explore. So all of the countries of the EU are supposed to be doing this. I work in Britain, so I've spoken to these people. They're getting hired at a very strong rate. The Canadians also are hiring regulators at a strong rate. I don't know as much about America. I grew up there, but I'm not plugged into the government. But I know that there's not as much agreement about how regulation should be done there. So I suspect that it's still pretty under-regulated, although, again, there are these discussions.
But what about the ethical issues, whether they are in the agenda at least in the public agenda that is promoted by the respective governments.
Yeah, no. So the Chinese have been very much. They're sort of like the British in that they complain a lot, but then they do actually implement quite a lot of the things. Although, of course, there's a lot of concern about whether China is treating its ethnic minorities ethically, because we know that the surveillance, which includes AI, has been used to really lock up a very large number of people, and is supposedly being used to re-educate them and to make sure they are enjoying being re-educated, so that they're paying attention and that they look happy and they don't look angry and things like this. And the same technology is supposed to be being developed for school children. So there's a big question. I mean, if you talk to Chinese colleagues, they say, oh, we're just making sure that the children is paying attention, and if they are, and if they're confused, then a teacher can come over and help them. And so we're watching that every student is getting the best they can out of it. But there has been horror stories, again, coming from the re-education camps and describing the schools of needing to always pay attention and to always enjoy being surveilled, so at least to appear to be happy. And I mean, it's for centuries. It's not only China, of course. Britain, 200 years ago, tried to ban people talking Scottish language or Welsh language. You know, a lot of countries try to exterminate a problematic. I mean, the language first, sometimes the people of problematic peoples.
Okay, so we can see the example of when these technologies have huge societal impact, but the understanding of the concept of ethics itself is very different in different countries, in different contexts, right?
Yes and no. So there's a lot of discussion about this. In fact, just Friday, I was at a meeting, Wednesday through Friday, with Chinese, a bilateral China-British meeting about this. And a lot of people talk about the East-West difference in ethics. And I think it's not as far apart as people say. The main question, I think everybody in the world knows that sometimes you have to sacrifice yourself for the society. You know, sometimes there's a war and people fight. Sometimes somebody is a fireman and races in. And, but I think we all also know that individual lives have to matter. That, you know, there have to be the love stories and the, you know, that we have to value and feel like we have value. The question is exactly, well, how do you balance these? And I think that's the core question right now in AI ethics. Well, one of the core questions. I also think that there's a less well understood question, but also extremely important, which is how do we distribute adequate amounts of revenue, which is the nice word for tax, from how the companies are deriving value when they derive it from observing everyone. So that's almost always the question. And if you don't invest, if a government can't invest enough in its people, then its people become very unhappy. Absolutely. So it's very important to make sure that we understand how, now that the transnational nature of AI is because of the transnational nature of corporations. Well, not just corporations, of digital communication. So it's part of the internet. It's part of, you know, it came from radios and telegraphs, you know. So as we make it easier and easier to communicate information, then naturally these companies are able to expand and to provide services at great distance. And so I think that's where some of the, again, it's not the magic of AI, it's not the personality of AI, it's the digital revolution. And it's good now that we're paying attention, partly because of people being overly scared about AI. But what is overly scared? Sometimes the British have a big thing. The British government really wants people to trust AI. And they say, how can we make people trust AI? And I'm like, no, we don't want them to trust AI. We want them to have the right amount of trust in AI. Because if they shouldn't be trusting these devices in their houses that are uploading their conversations to the cloud. they need to understand cybersecurity and think carefully about what machines they put into the Internet of Things, what they connect onto the internet, you know, what apps they put on their phones. They need to know if these are trustworthy companies. And so we need more education of the general public, as well as hopefully some regulation.
So it's a matter of digital skills, right?
It's about digital skills. I mean, the more you can educate your public, the less you need to educate the police, right? But one way or the other, yeah.
Yeah, that's interesting. And you mentioned technological corporations and technological monopolies, and I would like to ask you about your involvement in the Advanced Technology External Council, right? That's right. The name. Yeah, that was
External
under
Advisory Council, I think.
External Advisory Council, right? That was under the umbrella of Google, right?
Yeah.
And you were one of the members. What do you think was the Google's rationale behind this decision to create such a council?
Yeah.
And behind its intention to be involved in the public discussion about artificial intelligence? So what are the benefits for the corporations?
Right. Well, I think it's very hard to answer that question, not least because there was sort of one of these democratic or mob uprisings, so that we never met. And to be honest, even if you're inside of something, it's not so easy to be sure what's going on, but it's a lot easier than from being outside. But I think when Demis Hassabis sold DeepMind to Google, he said one of the requirements was that they should have ethics councils. And so I think they had a long
So that was kind of
promise.
Recommendations.
Yeah. But as they explained it to me, they already have internal ethics councils and boards, but the external one was to bring external perspectives on the policies they were coming up with. And so I think the advantage that they saw was that if they brought enough smart people, and they wanted smart, argumentative people with very different perspectives to stress test their policies. So I think they thought if they did that in-house first, then there'd be less chance that when they announced the policies more broadly, that people would find holes in them. So they wanted to find the holes before other people did. So I think they really just did want people that they would never have hired I don't know why they would never hire me, but some of the other people they were unlikely to hire. They wanted people to really, that were not very Google shaped, to come and talk to them, to help them think about it. So part of what they're trying to do is not look stupid in public. There's no question that part of which didn't work out very well in this case. Part of what they're trying to do is do the right thing. You know, companies are made of people, and people want to work for good places. And if you know, Facebook is having trouble hiring programmers right now, despite all the money they pay, because people are embarrassed to be associated with them because of their bad press. So that's part of it. But of course, part of it is that they're trying to reduce the probability that government tells them what to do. And
so it's a kind of internal regulation, not internal, but a mix of internal and external, with as many diverse points of view as possible, right?
That was the idea. I want to say that I think, especially again, the American corporations are too afraid of what the American government would do or could do if it was in a well-regulated space, a good government in a well-regulated space, because they can solve a lot of coordination problems, like I said, to coordinate their problems with each other, others from their same industry, others from other industries. You know, we use government to help us make it easier to have a space in which to work. I mean, so I think trying to avoid regulation is a less good strategy than trying to make sure there's the right kind of regulation. So working with the government to help, because they know they don't know that much about it, working with governments to help them put together good ideas, and you've got to pay taxes. The tech industry, you can tell they're not paying enough tax because they have too much money. I mean, it's just, all the biggest, You know, so when you see a big distortion like that, then you think, well, maybe things could be going better in society, and you could have less of these riots and pitchforks and things if you made sure that people had decent lives, and you know.
I see. Yeah, and my last question, I cannot skip the topic of universities being involved in the artificial intelligence agenda. So my question is about the role of university. What do you think should be changed in it, and how the research agendas of universities could be adjusted under the pressure of artificial intelligence achievements, especially not only of computer science, but of those universities that have strong capabilities in humanities, in social sciences, in economics. So how should they react to this challenge of artificial intelligence?
Well, I think honestly,
and that could be a recommendation for the participants of the Ostrov event.
Yeah, no, I think absolutely the universities that have strengths in social science and humanities and economics, maybe economics, economics isn't a bad way right now. But anyway, I think this is a great opportunity for them, because suddenly people are understanding the relevance, because they are seeing, they know technology matters because it produces money, right? They know that. And they also know technology matters because it affects security. You know, it used to be that governments wanted to talk about AI in the, you know, like the room full of like geese that make golden eggs. And they wanted to talk about cybersecurity under the weapons systems. And they did, and now pretty much most governments have realized you can't take those things apart. They're both totally, it's not the same thing, but you can't trust AI without cybersecurity, and you can't build cybersecurity without using AI. And so they're related, and they're not separable. So in the same way, we see that you can't talk about the consequences or the opportunities of this technology without talking about society. And that includes thinking about individuals and their jobs and all these things, and how they interact with each other, and how to keep them focused on the needs of the location. Because historically we had to talk to our neighbors because there was nobody else and we get bored. Now we can ignore our neighbors and be really entertained. And so we need to refocus, because your neighbors still affect your personal security, you know, how clean the air is, the water quality, your economy, whether your kids, you know, if they have vaccinated, you know, your neighbors matter a lot. So there's huge things for the humanities to be doing in helping us think about the localization of culture and attention and community. And there's huge things for the social sciences in thinking about these different flows of power, that the individuals aren't isolated. I mean, they never entirely were, but we couldn't think as well about it. We have more thinking tools now. You know, that's the thing. Intelligence, everything in academia is about using our minds. And now we have new tools to broaden what we can do with our minds. So we can conceptualize much more complicated things now, and we can start thinking more about what it means that, you know, everybody in Russia, I don't know for sure, you guys all have access to Google, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah, so you're all, not in China always, right?
That's true.
But
we also have our own search engine, which is Yandex.
Yeah, Yandex. You're all doing work for both Google and Yandex, you know? And what does that mean? And it's not just them. It's like, you know, airlines, you know, that you type in the forms that the airlines used to hire someone to do that. So there's a million ways that we're becoming interconnected. So sociology, political science, of course, all of these things have a big research agenda. But besides all that, there are, of course, opportunities for changing how we educate each other. And there's threats. There's threats because you could imagine a government that finds the universities creating too problematic of ideas, saying, oh, let's just have all of our students learn from the online courses provided by some totalitarian country over the border, you know, something like that.
Interesting perspective.
Yeah. So I think there's a huge amount of opportunities, and again, it's about making sure that there's enough redistribution into the university system So that because we are a part of our communities, and to make sure the universities focus on their communities, and that they're able to help enrich and find new ways for people to function, including new employment.
Yeah, that's a great recommendation, and I hope that some of Russian universities that has this capability of social sciences and of humanities, maybe of psychology, of how to educate people, how to teach people, that's also very important, could make their contribution to this issue, to the issue of making our achievements in artificial intelligence more compliant with our expectations about ethics, about societal impact.
There's so much more we can do in terms of identity too, though. Even in business administration should be talking to psychology and humanities, because we're thinking about an opportunity to create a whole set of new vocations. If we get this right.
Yeah. Okay. So that was my last question to you. And if you have any suggestion, any recommendation, any something to say to the audience of our event, you can use this opportunity to reach out not only those who would come to your evening lecture, but also the whole audience of the program.
Sure. Well, I guess the important thing is don't be too afraid, but don't be not afraid enough. Realize that things
Balance, right? Balance.
Realize that things are changing, and work with each other. There's a lot of information out there now, and so we need to work out how to control that and how to make lives within it. And that's true for all disciplines, but I would think that universities are in a particularly good position to walk across the corridor, talk to somebody from another discipline, and get some ideas going.
So to make it as interdisciplinary as possible, right?
Everything in its limit, but yes, I think everybody needs to pay attention to everybody else, at least a little.
Okay, thank you very much. It was a pleasure to interview you.
Yeah.